All right, so you want to print labels. In church windows, we can print labels, and we're going to look at printing labels for the example from the book, newsletter labels. Now, we can access labels two ways. We can use the really shortcut, easy way by just clicking labels right in the middle and all the shortcuts. That takes us to the same place as going up to Reports Export along the top, Reports and Labels, and choosing labels. Same exact screens, it's just everything right here in the middle. These are shortcuts of the most commonly used items. So I find it easier to just click right there on labels and bring up the labels. All right, so first thing we want to do on the labels screen is pick who is going to have labels printed. It tells us this is step 1. Select who should have labels printed. The first thing we're going to look at right here is step 1. We're going to add a people selection, and then we can use an and or an or, and if we want, add some giving or pledging. Let's go ahead and look at edit people selection. So if we click on edit people selection, here is where we can select from criteria to narrow down to the people we'd like. Now, a little later, I'm going to actually do an exercise and select specific things. Today, or for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and do mailing code. And we'll choose some of our mailing codes we want. And then we'll click Add to Selection to enter that. Now, I could go ahead and connect that with an and or an or use parentheses, and then go back up and choose other items if I like. We're just going to do this one criteria for now, but I'll go over another couple different criterias towards the end. Again, I mentioned we could use the and or the parentheses. Those are shown at the bottom of page 3. I'll move on to page 4 if you're following along in the book. And look in the upper right. We have some items we can use to narrow down to things pertaining to giving, such as people with or without a giver number, a specific giver number range, or if we've created named ranges, we could select those. Here we've created one by clicking the plus sign. That's our envelopes for children, 200 through 250. We don't want to narrow down to anything having to do with giving, so we're going to leave that alone. If you'd only like a specific category, you can check or uncheck categories. We're just going to ask for members, so I'll uncheck visitors. Along the bottom right, we can choose to include different items such as inactive people, our membership groups, or people who are just in donations as individual or group givers. We're going to leave all that alone. We don't want to include any of that. So once you make any of your choices on the Edit People selection screen, lower right, we can click OK, or we can click Cancel to cancel that. All right. Now, if I'd like, I can go ahead and connect this with an and or an or. An and would mean they have to meet the criteria I select in step 1 and meet the criteria in step 2. They have to meet all of it. If I were to put an or, that would mean I want people who meet what I select in step 1 or they meet what I select in step 3. So that would be a broader search. We're not going to do anything with giving or pledging, so we'll just leave it at and, but let's just look real quick. If you want to do any giving or pledging here, you can do all kinds of things with giving, people who do or do not give, certain amounts, same for pledging, whether or not they receive a statement, give with family, also including a date range. And you'd make your selection here and click and. We're just going to leave it at giving all and pledging all. So if you don't touch this or do anything with it, it just leaves it at the default, which would mean it's really looking only at whatever criteria you put into section 1. All right, so if we look along the top, we also have an accounts tab along the top. And here we can select a certain campaign or certain giving accounts if we'd like. Currently, this will just look at all giving accounts. Really won't, consider giving because it's including all accounts. The last tab we have here is our sort tab, where we can choose how we want the information sorted. A lot of people think this is what will be on the report. This is what order that information is going to be in. And the default here is typically for name, last, first alphabetic. But notice we can choose from just about any field on the records to sort by. We'll go ahead and leave it at alphabetic. And then you can sort by up to 3 different fields. So maybe you sort by membership date, and then if people have the same membership date, you want to sort then alphabetically. You could sort by just one field or all 3. It's up to you. If you choose, though, a date field, notice in the lower left, when I choose a date field, that opens up where I can choose for my date fields to sort first by year or first by month. All right. Now, on to page 5. If you have a criteria that you use often and you want to save it to save yourself time in entering that, you can, down along the bottom, click on this little Save Selection icon, and that will bring up a window where we can save our criteria. We'll call it Mailing List. And if I say OK, what it's saving is what I've done on step 1. It doesn't save the future or step 2. It's saving all my search criteria and what I've just now built on step 1. So if I were to exit here and come back into labels, I can go right down, and I have some other save selections here, but I can choose Mailing List. And notice now it shows right here in my criteria box. This includes members, mailing code of all mailings, out-of-towners, and newsletter only. So it saved that criteria, and it makes it a little easier for me to just choose that criteria each time. Now, if you do a save selection with giving and pledging information, that's where you might need to go in and change your date range, because it is saving a date range. So if you're looking for different date ranges from one week to the next on a save search, you might need to go in and edit your date range. All right, let's go ahead and hit Next. I'm at the bottom of page 5 if you're following along in the book. Once we click Next, that takes us to step 2, where it's chosen the people based on what search criteria we put in to select the people we want. Now, if we look at the top, we're on step 2, select the label layout. So we're going to determine what we want on this label. So we have quite a bit of things we can choose from. A date of mailing would determine what current address to pull from, and that's important if you use a lot of alternate addresses where people may be, if you live in Ohio like I do, you might have snowbirds that go away to Florida when it gets cold here. So if you want you want it to look at a different date, you can change the date here. Under label layout, that's where we're going to choose what layout or what names we want it to pull from the records. Now, if you're on the most current version of the program, there are some templates that are pre-built for you. The Avery 5160 with mailing label, that will pull from, I'd like to show you the visual real quick. That will pull from the upper left, the actual mailing label field. Let me get a highlighter here. That's going to pull from the field called mailing label. So it would pull the name Miss Nina Abenshine. If I were, let me get my clicking tool back instead of my drawing tool. If I were to do a label, oops, now I got to go back again. That is Avery 5160 with names. That is going to pull from, let me go back to the records. That will pull from the actual first and last name, the actual individual name fields. So the label layout, it doesn't determine how many labels you get. It's going to determine what name it puts on the label you select. So you might get 5 labels with the mailing label name on it if you ask for, let me go back again, We'll choose our save selection. There we go. So I could choose one label per individual, but if I choose this 5160 mailing label, notice I'm going to get labels with the family name or the mailing label name. But if there's 5 people in a family, notice here the Jen Arnold family, I know there's 2 people there, and I'm getting 2 labels, which looks like duplicates, but they're not. I chose one label for every person in the household, but I chose a label that's putting the family name on it. So if I switch over here to the label with names and do one label per individual, we now can see that one is for Jen and one is for Richard Arnold. So again, the label layout is going to determine which name goes on the label, taking from the mailing label field or the individual name fields. And then below here, what says one label per, I can do one for every person in the household that meets my search criteria. Giving unit is more if you are doing something having to do with giving, because it will pull whatever name it sees based on whether they give as a family or not. If they give as a family, you'll get the mailing label name. If they give individually, you'll get their actual individual first and last name. So really, for these labels through membership today, I'm more concerned with individual or family. So if I choose family and do this mailing label, and notice now I'm just going to get one label that says the Arnold family or Mrs. Jen Arnold, because that must be what was up in the mailing label field. Let me see. Yep. All right. Now let's look at how we can create a new label. If you want to create a new label, we can click right here on New. And that brings up a window where you can choose your label product and product number. If you look at the list, there's quite a variety. We're going to go with the standard 5160. That's the most common used. You can click Next, and that brings up a page where you can adjust the parameters, but it's rare you need to do that. So usually I just click Finish. And that's going to bring up the actual report designer screen where we can add or create different labels. Now, I'm not going to go into detail here because we really only have about 5 minutes left and I could talk for days. But I know we have some more in-depth classes and webinars and information online that go into the label designer and the report designer. They both work very similarly. So I'm going to click No here. But do know on the most current version, you are going to have the 2 templates available. And I got ahead of myself here. So if I choose the mailing label, meaning it's taking from the family name field or the mailing label field, below that I can choose, do I want one for every person in the family, for giving units, or just one label per family. And if I have used a page of labels, and maybe I've used half of those, and I want to, I'm actually on page 9 now, if I want to maybe start halfway down the page, I can choose a different label position. Notice if I click Print now, it's going to begin those labels. Now it's going down and then starting at the top. Should have one at the bottom though, because I started on page 9. I think I may have more than 10 per page, but notice it's jumping to the start position I asked for, so I don't have to use a brand new sheet of labels every time. If you use Postage Saver, you can check that here to connect a Postage Saver. Below we have a select box where maybe I just want to send to one person, or I want to make sure someone is on this list. I can search for that person and it will take me right to that person's name here in the list. Now if the list is the way I want it, I have everyone I need. Notice along the bottom I could hit back if I needed to go back and change my search. I can uncheck Print for All. Maybe I just want to real quick print this one. Not sure why I'd run all of them if I just wanted one, but I just want you to see I could go through and check just the ones I want and hit print, and then it's only going to bring those up. And they're going to be way down the page because I didn't change my page position. Change this back to 0 so it, or yeah, 1 so it doesn't look weird. Let's go ahead and we'll check Print for All. Upper right-hand corner, we have some label options. We can uppercase our text for mailing, which we did have that checked. If we were including a birth date on the label, we could also choose to include the year. We could have names on separate lines and a separate label for active alternative addresses. And we can also include additional family members if we've linked. Most often we see children that, parents are divorced and they go back and forth between the household. Sometimes you'll link those children to both houses. We can include those. And then there's also some unlisted options. These are more often used on reports and directories, but they are available for labels. You can print phones, emails, or addresses, either print them or not print them, and opt to show an asterisk beside them to indicate that they are unlisted. All right. I'm going to go ahead and jump to page 11 if you're following along the book and do some sample labels for you. I did kind of jump over changing a label design just because we are at 20 minutes and I still have 5 pages to go through for you. So let me go back and we're going to look at some sample labels for all families in the people file. If we want to produce those for everyone in the people file, we can click on labels. And then we'll click on Edit People Selection Criteria. We're going to include visitors, but we don't want inactive, so we're not going to check that. We're going to leave this membership field blank because we want everyone. Also, we're going to not include membership groups, so I'll make sure that's unchecked. No changes to giver numbers. We're just going to leave pretty much we want everyone in the database, even visitors. So we are not going to really do anything here. So we'll click OK. We're not going to change the and or, and we're not going to add any giving or pledging. And then I'm going to turn to page 13. So we'll go ahead and hit next. Now here, again, we want to choose the label layout we want to use. We'll use our mailing label layout. And we're going to do 1 per family. And then we'll click print. And let's look at some of the things, a few things on the preview. Along the top of the preview, you have some different controls. The print button is in the upper left, and if you click the print, it will bring up your printer dialog box where you can make printer choices. Some other things like your page setup where you can change some different specifications about the page. I want to show you right here at the very top, almost middle, is this eye. If I click on the eye, that will give me a summary, and it also gives me a zip code summary as well. So if you need a zip code summary, if you're doing bulk mail and you need a summary for that bulk mail, that is now within the actual print preview. You can get that by clicking the eye and then going to copy text. Then you can take that over to Word and paste that in and print that out. So have a nice little zip code summary now. All right, after you are done printing your labels, you just click the X in the upper right to close out of that. And let's look real quick at how we can do labels for a group or class. Now this is done a little bit differently. Because we want a group or class, we're going to go the long route. We're going to go up to Reports Export. We're going to choose Groups and Skills, and then Groups and Classes, and then Labels. Now we want to send something to our choir, so we want to find any of our choirs, which are right here in our second column. So I'll check off my adult choir, high school choir, and youth choir, and then click Add to Selection. And now we see, now I did not mention real quick, notice when we went through groups, classes, and labels, one of the differences going through some of the more canned reports like anniversary, birthday, or groups and skills is when you go through those, it automatically brings up that specific window. We didn't even have to click on Edit People Selection and then find Groups or Skills from the drop-down. It automatically brought up our Groups, Classes selection because we are going through the Groups Skills button along the top. So once I choose those, I go ahead and add those selection. Now over to the right, we can choose our members or visitors, check or uncheck anything here. I'm going to turn to page 15. And I think we have everything we need, so I'm just going to click OK. Oops, and I forgot to click plus selection, so if you forget to do that, it will prompt you, and I want to tell it, yes, I do want to add that. And it brings me back to step 1, where we can see our criteria, groups, classes is adult choir, high school choir, or youth choir in the present. All right. So we're going to go ahead on the sort tab. I want it alphabetic. Let's see. Or you could do it by zip code. That might be appropriate if you'd like. We don't want any giving or pledging, so I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Now here we can go ahead and take a look and make sure we have the right people. Does this look like the correct people who are in our choir? Now if we want a label for the actual individual who's in choir, then we can ask for 5160 with names, because remember that one with mailing label field, that would actually put the family name. So we might want to be more specific and put the individual name. And then if we want every person in the choir to receive this letter, we could do one label per individual. Now, if you want to send just one letter to each family, but have each individual name on that one label, we can choose family. So let's look at that and hit print. And now we can see, if we look right down, if you look at this, well, second column, second one, we have Dorothy, comma, Bella Lewis. Across from that, Una Ann, Hannah Oliver, and Donna. So it's grouping together the people in a family and putting all the individual names of each person who is in the adult, senior, or youth choir. And that way just creating one label that we could send to the family versus if we were to choose individual, we're going to get a few more labels. We choose individual, we're getting each individual name, but in each family, everybody's getting their own label instead of, putting it all on one label for the same family. Here you see we have Nate Knox and Sarah Knox at the same address, which is fine if you want to send each person their own letter, but you might want to save postage and labels. And for people, we're in a family, the same people are in the choir, we could send one letter to each of those persons.